Alright, where to begin? This has been a very long grind for the pro-Triglavian forces, but eventually we pushed the Raravos system to the final liminality. Ah, we're so close! Look at that! But before I get into the whole thing with the final liminality and what happened there, let me go back to a week ago to my previous video. That's when we hit the first liminality, and when I uploaded the video right after the game downtime, we got a new structure, the Dash Porvidium Transmuter. That is that sun harvester structure / weapon that is in theory extracting Isogen 5 material from the sun. I'm not too familiar with the lore, but that is the material that Triglavians are really after. Initially the structure also had defensive weapons surrounding it, but unfortunately the Edencom NPC fleet was just too strong. Our Kybernaut fleet was not strong enough to handle them, as well as the Triglavian NPCs were also overrun. The transmuter itself though seems to be invulnerable. It's quite an interesting structure, and you could still see the Triglavian industrial ships warping and delivering something to the Locus, and they were accompanied by the NPC Triglavian fleet. Presumably the transmuter is under construction, and these industrial ships are delivering materials that are being gathered by the mining platforms that are now being placed in the asteroid belts of Raravos. Taking a closer look at the transmuter itself, this is the first liminality, and at the side of this structure there are vents. So one out of the 3 vents was active at this point in time. And at the back of the structure, the transmuter was forming these Triglavian energy balls or singularities. I'm not really sure what to call them. But at the first liminality it was only forming 1 out of 3. So this kind of means that we still have 2 more stages to go through to get the transmuter to its full force. But as much as we were all excited that we achieved first liminality and we could see the Triglavian invasion progress now, at this point in time the campaign kinda started to grind to a halt. There was a bit of an infighting within the pro-Triglavian forces. The Test Alliance had a major presence in the system, and they were trying to anchor a station to serve as a main hub for all the pro-Triglavian activity. At the same time, an Evenline streamer Bjorn B was also helping the pro-Triglavian side by running the sites. But of course this is Eve, and at some point in time the 2 groups started fighting. Eventually Test managed to anchor a station for us, but we were still unprepared really to face the Edencom NPCs in the first liminality stage. Our fleet composition and doctrine was just not optimized to face these tougher NPCs. Not to mention Raravos has attracted a lot of attention. Not that it was low-sec, it was creating so much PvP content. I mean, all of a sudden you get a big group of people trying to run PvE content in low-sec. That got so many PvP groups on grid. If it was an Agoon fleet with 200 people flying Tech 3 destroyers, it was snuffed out with their Cerberus fleet, not to mention smaller PvP fleets roaming around. At times it was rather frustrating. You would log in trying to push that bar towards the second liminality, but the fleet would have to stand down because simply we couldn't run any sites. Interestingly though, this is where we found out that you don't necessarily have to push the bar all the way to the left to achieve second liminality. The invasion has a built-in timer. You only have to hold the system in the first liminality stage for what seemed to be 48 hours. From what I understand, in theory, Edencom forces could come in and flip the system to readout. That's the equivalent stage to first liminality on the Edencom side. But since they didn't do it, we managed to achieve second liminality just by holding our position. At this point in time though, the bar would have to be pushed all the way to the left to achieve the final liminality. We had a few more attempts at doing that, but sadly the progress would just revert back whenever we weren't running any fleets. And this is where I personally started thinking that systems kind of default towards the Edencom side. We have seen that Edencom NPC forces are stronger than the Triglavian ones. And interestingly, I would watch all of these systems in the recon stage that are, for example, in low-sec, and they're trending towards Edencom. At the time of making of this video, there are 13 systems that have achieved the Edencom fortress. But I personally highly doubt that was due to the concerted effort by the pro-Edencom Capsuleer forces. As much as I think that there's way too many Capsuleers that are supporting Edencom, you all should join the Triglavian side instead. For now, the pro-Edencom contingent is actually smaller than the pro-Triglavian one. And I don't think Capsuleers are going out of the way to protect low-sec systems. That just seems counterproductive, they're low-sec already. So being on the pro-Triglavian side, we're definitely swimming against the current here. But going back to the second liminality stage in Raravos, after the downtime, a world arc has appeared at the transmuter, and the transmuter got upgraded. Sadly, I wasn't there to witness it, but big thanks to Uriel who was there, who recorded footage and let me use it in this video. The world arc was getting hit hard by the Edencom NPCs and eventually it signed out. But check out this cool audio of it all happening. Let's listen in for a bit. So with the transmuter upgraded, we can now see 2 out of 3 vents being active and 2 out of 3 Triglavian energy balls are being made. And the Rarva Sun, it's not looking too good right now. And we can also see bigger industrial Triglavian ships delivering the materials to the locus. At this point in time, the Triglavian community figured out that one of the keys to actually capturing the system for the Triglavians is to go after the roaming NPC fleets. Running the site certainly helps to progress the invasion, but the Triglavian industrial ships need to be protected in order for them to do their job, and those roaming Edencom NPC fleets are quite deadly. On top of that, the Triglavian community has established a solid doctrine. NFCs have started assembling fleets non-stop, and with this major push, we'd managed to get the system to final liminality. It was quite awesome to participate in that, and if you haven't yet, I strongly recommend that you do. Everybody was excited and exhausted, and as we finally flipped the system, well, it kind of bugged out. CCP Convict was actually in our fleet as it happened, and he was so apologetic and just disappointed as to what the hell just happened. Basically, initially everything reverted back as if the invasion wasn't even there. All of the Triglavian effects were gone, the nebulae reverted from red back to the regular Amar one, and the system went back up to 0.6 security status. At which point, some people in the fleet weren't really on the best standing with the local NPC navy, and ships started popping. So that was a bit of a letdown, but people were still happy that we actually managed to achieve the first final liminality in EVE Online. At the next downtime, Rarva's security status went to -0.1, so this became the first ever Empire nullsec system. This is rather new and kind of weird. Although it's a null system now, you still cannot deploy sinos or warp bubbles. Of course, everybody gathered up at the transmuter to see what happens next, and unfortunately, once again, nothing. There was no world arc spawning, and we still appear to be at stage 2 of the transmuter level. At the next downtime, the system security status dropped down to -1.0, so true nullsec, but still Empire nullsec, so no sinos, no warp bubbles. And at the time of making of this video, still no world arc, and the transmuter is level 2 out of 3. Naturally, as I upload this video and it goes live, we might see something in the game, and of course I will update everybody on that. But for now, once again, we have word from CCP that everything is as it should be. So we don't know what exactly is the reason as to why the transmuter hasn't been upgraded yet. Maybe it is time-based, maybe we need to capture more systems, at this point we just don't know. Very interestingly though, General Stargazer has put forward a very cool theory. He has been watching the Rarva Sun since we reached the final liminality. He noticed that at the side of the transmuter there's an inscription which, when translated from Triglavian, means Zordash. That is the World Arc class of Triglavian ships. So he's thinking at this time that the transmuter itself will become the World Arc once it gathers enough material from the sun. So maybe that's why we haven't seen the World Arc yet. Regardless, the pro-Triglavian side is soldiering on. It took us something like 5 days for Rarvas to achieve its final liminality. The next target system that we have, Veil, will likely get its final liminality in just 2 days. We learned a lot from Rarvas, and now it's time for us to apply all this knowledge to the next systems. Thank you so much for watching. As soon as we find out what happens to the transmuters, I'll be making another update. In the meantime, join the Triglavian community and let's mess things up in HiSec.